In this TechPub episode, we're going to consume the techpub.com production API so we can actually build up a couple of models in relation to the productions and the episodes for the actual TechPub application. In the previous episodes, this data was modeled out as the category info object as well as the video info object inside of the source directory inside of the models package. We're going to replace these in the upcoming episodes with two objects that we're going to create in this episode. And these objects that we're going to create are called the production object and the episode object. But before we get into understanding how I have come to those two types of objects and what details are within them, let's take a look at the production API for techpub.com. Techpub.com exposes an API at www.techpub.com/productions.json. What this will do is create a JSON result that will be streamed down to the server, from the server to the client, which you can consume. Now this is a JSON object, so if I was to copy this into the web browser and we hit enter, it would download and open up in my web browser. Right now I have it opening up in a text editor, and this is the list of JSON that's returned back from the TechPub call. You'll see production 6 up at the top here of the file. I've downloaded this 6 times, so there's just 6 different files saved locally with the same data. This is all of the data that we can consume and to create a TechPub app. So if we scroll down, there's lots and lots and lots and lots of data. This is all of the current episodes on the site. So as the TechPub team starts adding new episodes to the TechPub website, we can refresh from the productions.json URL shown above, and what will happen is we'll then retrieve all of the brand new and existing TechPub episodes and productions themselves. In the end result, what we want to do is we want to be able to take this data in here and turn it into regular, what we call POJOs, and that's going to be POJO. Those are plain old Java objects. And these plain old Java objects are going to represent a domain model. And this domain model is going to be a production, which is going to be, for example, Introduction to Android, the series that you're watching, or the MVC2 series, perhaps the Rails 3 series that recently came out. And each one of these productions is going to have a list of episodes inside of it. So we need to turn this JSON, this big, huge honking string here, and turn it into some objects that we can work with. So how do we really go about doing that? Well, the first thing that I like to do to understand JSON, and this is in regards not to just TechPub's API, but into other APIs I've worked with, such as Eventbrite's API, which can return JSON. You can get JSON back from Twitter and many other different types of social networks out there as well. So what I'll do is I'll take the productions.json here, and I'll go to another website. It's called JSONformat.com. Let's go to JSON format, and this will load up. Now what you can do is you can cut and paste all the JSON data in there, or you can just type in the URL down below. And I'm going to scroll down and we'll hit process. And what this will do is go get the JSON, and it will return it and format it into a readable manner for us, which it's doing now. So here's the JSON that was just returned, the formatted JSON data from the URL above. And now we can actually kind of look at it and see how the JSON really lays out inside of the screen. And so this JSON actually has a can watch attribute. We have a description. So we have a bunch of properties here. And if you're not familiar with JSON, it's essentially a very simple data structure, keys and values. And we have different arrays in here. And so we see that we're starting off with a square bracket on the left here, which looks like we're starting off in an array, which we are. We actually are starting off in a productions array. So we have a list of productions that are coming back down from the API. And each production has certain values and properties. One of them is can watch, stating can the user watch this one. Another one is description, the description of the series, the production itself. And then inside of there's also another array, which we can see by starting off another left-hand bracket here. And if I'm going to scroll down just a little here, this right here, the highlighted piece that you see, is all one episode. This is just one episode data here. We have the author, which is null, and this is returned from TechPub, so I can't say why the data is null. TechPub's returning the data back as null, so I need to be able to handle that and take an account for that, which we'll get to. You also have the description of the episode. The duration looks like it's probably 3 minutes long. the episode slug. So this is kind of what the short name of it's going to be. It's called just NU. The height of the video, the ID of the video, the notes if there's any notes associated with it, the number, which number of videos is this. We have the PID, and then we have the production ID. Now the PID is the ID of the actual production itself. The production ID is currently null, returned from the TechPub API. Again, I'm not sure why that is null. Next we have the release dat. The release dat is when this was released, and it's just a simple date format with the slug, which is the actual slug of the episode itself, .NET OSS. The title of the episode, which is new, and use 480, which is a version to say, use a certain type of formatting. We're going to be using false here, and the width is 640. And if we scroll down a little bit more, we'll see that we have another episode here. This one's about subsonic. We scroll down another one, we have spec flow. We scroll down another one, we're running into looks like author null. Episode 15 is mastering ASP.NET MVC, and keep coming down. This one is Iron Ruby. We'll keep coming down. Spec flow assist, and then down at the bottom we end the array out. So we're at the end of the JSON array. And there's a couple more properties that exist at the end. These are properties that are going to be on the production object themselves. So we have a price, 0, the slug, which is the slug that we're going to short name for the production itself, .NET OSS, and a title, which is the .NET open source production. Now you can think of these keys and these values as just properties inside of an object, and that's how I tend to think of them. And so what I'll actually do is I'll come into the Eclipse project that we have set up here, and I'll go into the models project, and I'm just going to go ahead and create a new class, and this one's going to be called just production. I'm going to click finish because I know I'm going to need a production, and a production is going to have a list of episodes. So I'm going to create an episode class too. I'm going to create an episode, and I know that inside of the production I'm probably going to have all the fields that I would need to have from the TechPub API. So if we return back to the TechPub API, we can see we have all this data inside of here. We'll return to the JSON format version. And I know that the production is going to need a property called, or a field called CanWatch, a field called description, a field which has a list of episode objects. And then each episode is going to have a duration, it's going to have an author, a description, episode slug, height, ID, etc. We're going to follow the pattern here. We're going to create all the properties with the same exact name and the same nomenclature, meaning that the same format of naming. And we'll come down to the bottom, and we'll also add price, slug, and title onto the production as well. We'll go back to Eclipse, and we're going to go ahead and fill the production class out. So let's go ahead and type this out now. Okay, so I've created the production class here, and we see that we have a private string title, slug, price, CanWatch, description. We have a list of episodes, and I've also added another ID field here that we're probably going to use with inside of the app to kind of keep track of the production here. This will probably be used also when we save this data to the database in future episodes. What we can do here is we have a list of episodes. So I'm using regular Java generics here, and I'm saying we have a list of episodes, and it's a new array list. And it looks like we have an error, so I'll hover over the error and click import, which then will automatically add a import statement up top here. And I'm going to do the same thing for list. Now there's also, you can click the import here, or you can actually press Command Shift O if you're on a Mac, or Control Shift O if you're on Windows, and it will import the statements for you automatically and resolve any errors in regards to imports. Now, I could have just left these as private. What I went ahead and have done is created the getters and the setters for each one of these. If I wanted to do that automatically, Eclipse provides us a couple of nice tools. So I'm going to delete this to show you how to do it. We can right click and we can go to Source, Generate Getters and Setters. And I know I'm going to want a getter and setter for everything in here because I'm going to these are kind of like automatic properties as you might see them in .NET, or we just want to have an ability to set them and get them. So I'm going to select all and click OK. And what this does is it generates all of our properties here. So now what I need to do is I need to create into my episode. Let's go to the episode. I'm selecting this and open the episode object. And inside the episode, we need to fill out what's inside of the episode. And if we return back to JSONformat.com, we'll see each episode is going to have an author, description, duration, episode slug, height, etc., all the way down to the width. So I'm going to create properties, local fields, private fields that represent all of these names here. So let's go ahead and hop back over and fill those out now. Okay, so I've filled out the episode, and we have the private values for description, height, continually all the way down to the bottom here. These are all the properties that get sent over from the API from TechPub itself. Now what we can do is we can generate the getters and setters as I've done here, or you can do it yourself. So if we save this, we will have a production and an episode. Now you may be wondering, why am I not just reusing category info and video info? I've already developed them at this point in time. Why not just reuse them? The reason that I'm not reusing them is because TechPub is following a particular pattern of having productions and episodes. And to me, it makes more sense to follow their particular convention, so anyone who picks up this app or maybe develops it in the future can correlate between the TechPub API and the application. They don't have to really do any context switching between, okay, is this a video, or is this an episode, or is this a category, is this a production? If I just call them the same thing that TechPub would call them, then I know that it's going to be easier for someone to understand in the future. So that's why I'm creating the new production object and a new episode object. So we have these two objects here. So the next task that we have here is actually getting the production and episode objects populated. So I need to get a list of productions back from the API. So whenever I call into productions.json, I'm going to return this big long string here, and this big string is going to actually be all the data that I need. I need to put that into Java objects. So how to do that? That's the next real big question. In order to get the JSON string into the objects, we have a couple of different options. One of these options is to use the Android JSON object, which is built in to Android itself. So if we were to go to the documentation here, we'll see we have the Android JSON object. Now what this allows you to do is generate a new JSON object, which is a object inside it that we can use for to parse JSON itself. Now we can pass in through the method here, through the constructor, our JSON, which gives us a new JSON object, and then we can pretty much go over and loop over this JSON object and kind of start plucking values from it. So we can say get an integer, get a double, get a Boolean value. We can start testing, see if certain things are there, get the length, the names. In the end, this is a really, really rudimentary process, and you're going to see a lot of examples on the web that actually illustrate how to do it with the JSON object. Personally, I don't particularly like that, mainly because I feel it's really rudimentary and I shouldn't have to spend that amount of time. I feel that this is kind of recreating the wheel, and there should be some type of auto mapping jar or third-party library out there that should do this for me. And fortunately, there is. So we're not going to use the JSON object, and you can hopefully thank me later on this because it will save you a lot of time. So what I actually use is JSON. Now JSON is a library created by Google, and this library can convert Java objects into their JSON representation and back and forth. So to take a particularly easy example is we can take a particular production object and we'll give it a list. We'll just give it some string input and say, hey JSON, I want you to take this string input, which is JSON, and I want you to convert it into a production object. And what it will do is it'll give you a production object back, hydrated with all the fields that it could match up. Behind the scenes, it uses some reflection to kind of populate the fields for you. And how it does it is a convention-based type of thing. So if we return back to the JSON format, we'll see that, let's go back to an illustration of an episode. So an episode has an author, a description, a duration, episode slug, etc. If we go back to the episode object, we see that we have the exact same names of the property. So episode underscore slug. We'll go back to the JSON format, episode underscore slug. Now there's a particular reason that I did this, is because JSON will look for the object's property field names. We'll look for the field names inside of the episode objects that match the JSON property names. So if the JSON key or property name is called episode underscore slug, when JSON is trying to hydrate a new episode object off of a JSON string, it's going to look for a property called episode slug, and if it has it, it will shove the value of episode slug in there. And so you can actually perform various different types of values. So if you know use 480 inside of the JSON, which is right here, use 480, it's false, so we know it's a Boolean value. I can just say, hey Java, this is a Boolean value, and JSON will actually convert that string false or true into a Boolean value. The same with doubles, ints, strings, etc. So I followed the exact convention. So the production object and the episode object inside of our episodes, instead of our application now, mimic the JSON API. So you may be thinking like, well, what happens if the JSON API changes? That's going to break your app. That's true. But if the JSON API changes and it was different anyway, it's going to break my app regardless. So I'm just going to go ahead and stick with the nomenclature that TechPub's providing. So I'm following their production naming, their episode naming, and I'm also following their field naming as well. So it's really easy for me to consume. So we have to kind of create some type of class that's going to do this mapping for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up the TechPub project here, and I'm going to create a new package here. And this package is going to be called com.techpub.mappers. And this is where we're going to put all of our mappers here. Now, in order to test these mappers, I already know, or to run these mappers, I know that I'm going to be mapping from a one particular type to another particular type. So I'm going to create a couple of interfaces here. And the first interface that I'm going to create is, I'm going to call iMapper, and we'll just click finish, and let's create a new mapper interface. A little side note here is, you may have noticed that I'm putting I in front of here. If you are a Java programmer, you're probably wincing at this point because you probably believe that I'm following a Hungarian notation. There is an argument that I've had with many different Java friends of mine stating that if I use I in front of my interface, then I'm being a Hungarian notation. Now, what normally happens with a Java implementation compared to a C# implementation is a little bit different. So what I have here is an example. In C#, which my background is, if I have a mapper, like I have a production object, I'm going to call the interface for that an iProduction mapper. That's what I'm going to name the class. And then my implementation of it is just going to be called production mapper. In Java, things are a little bit backwards, and I personally don't like that, so I'm sticking to C# roots that I have, and I feel that prefixing a interface with I is more readable to me, so I'm going to stick with that nomenclature for now. But in Java, the interface name is just going to be production mapper. That's what a normal interface name would be. And the actual implementation, the actual class would be production mapper IMPL for implementation. I particularly don't like IMPL. I feel that's also some type of Hungarian notation, just kind of flipped on its head, just at the other end. So I'm going to stick with the C# nomenclature for I for interfaces. And so anytime you see an I inside of my classes, inside of this TechPub application, that means it's an interface. If we return back to the iMapper interface, I'm going to use some generics here. And so what I'm going to say is I'm going to have a T input, so some type of input, and it's going to have some type of output. So there's going to be an input parameter and an output parameter. So T input and T output, and it's going to have one method, and it's going to output the return value of this method call. This method is called map from. It's going to take a particular type of input, so T input, and it's going to return a particular type of output. So this is a very generic, very abstract level of abstraction for mappers. So I'm taking input and I'm going to return an output. And now all of my mappers are going to adhere to this interface. And so now I know that I'm going to be mapping from JSON. I'm going to create another interface here. And this interface is going to be a JSON mapper. And I'm going to extend an interface here. And I'm going to say iMapper. Click this OK. And you'll see iMapper has T input and T output here. And I know my input is going to be string. I know I'm going to be inputting a JSON string. So I'm going to give you a string, I'm going to give a mapper a string object, and I'm going to expect some particular type of output back. So hit finish. And then all I have here is an output. And you'll see output is red here because the JSON mapper has not declared anywhere where we're going to use T output. So the JSON mapper is also going to be a generic class, generic interface as well. And what this is basically doing is saying we're going to have a contract for a JSON mapper where whatever type I implement here is going to return a string. And let's go into the mappers, and we're going to create one more interface here for this. And this interface is going to be called iProductionMapper. So this is going to be responsible for mapping productions. So I'm going to say iJSONMapper. I'm going to extend this interface. SAT output. I can edit it here, or I can edit it in the class. I'm going to say production here. Finish. And you'll see it doesn't know what production is, so we'll hover over or Command Shift O or Control Shift O, depending on your operating system, and it adds the import. And so now what I have is I have an interface that's going to return a production, and it's going to take in a string. So I'm going to say take in a string and return a production. So let's go ahead and build this out. But before we really do so, let's actually kind of test drive this out. Let's actually create a unit test to do this. So what we can do, let's come in and right click in the Workspace Package Explorer area, say New, Android Project. And it's not going to be Android Project. So I'm going to say New, Project, and I'm going to go Android Test Project. Next. And it says use a default location. That's fine. We're going to stick it in. Actually, it's not fine. You put this in a different location. I am now working on a Mac. You may have noticed, but previous episodes I was working on a Windows machine. And so this actually illustrates the fact that I can move my code from a Windows machine directly over to a Mac, and it's the same exact code base. I just pulled it back down from the Git repository on a Mac that I have, and now I'm up and running on a Mac. So all my stuff is stored inside of Android TechPub, and we can go inside of Android here, and let's go ahead and create our tests right here at the root of TechPub. Open, and we're going to call this TechPub tests, and we are going to select the project to test, an existing Android project. We want to select TechPub. It's 1.6 minimum SDK version. We're not going to worry about that right now. Not really a need because we're not going to be publishing the tests at all. And actually, the location, I'm going to put TechPub, and I'm going to put tests as the destination folder here. So hit finish. So we're now going to have a TechPub tests. So this is going to be our test folder here. So what we want to do is now we're going to use JUnit to actually drive out a test here to make sure that our mapper works as we would expect it to work. Alright, once we have our test application up and running here, we need to come inside of the actual default package and create a new class called AllTests. And it's going to have a superclass of Test Suite. And hit Control Space, and you can see Test Suite, JUnit, and finish. And so we'll see that we have Test Suite here. Let's go ahead and fill this out. And we have it now filled it out. We see that we're missing a couple things, so Command Shift O or Control Shift O, load everything up. And what this class is going to do is it's going to load up all the tests. So it's going to build up the test suite for us. So it's going to say all test.class, include all the packages underneath here, and build it up. So this is going to be our test class. So now what we need to do is we need to create an actual test class for our mappers. So let's just create a class, and we'll call it production list mapper test, because remember, we're going to map from a list of productions. The TechPub API provides a list of productions, so we're not going to map a particular one production. We're actually going to map a whole bunch of them. So we're going to production list mapper tests, and then we're going to say test case, which is a JUnit class. We're going to extend that. Now we're actually going to create our first test here. So public void, and we have to start the name out with test. So public void test, and I'm going to kind of use a kind of halfway BDD style testing. There are BDD frameworks out there. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to really kind of get into that. If you're interested in BDD, there's SpecFlow and a couple other screencasts on, I believe, Cucumber on TechPub as well. You can get into it. There are Java BDD frameworks as well, but I will not be using that. I'm just going to be using the built-in JUnit test framework at this time. So I'm going to say test should be able to parse the JSON into a list of productions. Alright, So now I can actually write some tests. And what I'm going to want to do is say I production list. We have a production mapper, I production mapper equals, say mapper equals new production mapper. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to rename this production mapper. I'm going to rename this to, by right-clicking, refactor, rename. I'm going to rename this to iProductionList mapper because I'm going to be mapping not just one production, but a list of productions. So let's rename that to list. So we found potential matches. Okay, that's fine. Rename it. We've renamed it. And now we just need to import it. So I'm going to auto import it through the hotkeys, Control-Shift-O. I have not created production list mapper yet, so we're still going to receive an error. So let's come up to the mapper class up here and Command-Shift-N or Control-Alt-N. You'll get this little window here and create a new class. Create production list mapper. The interface is going to be iProductionList mapper and finish. Now when I create this class, you're going to see automatically what happened is because I implemented the iProductionList mapper class, I have now received this method for free. So it's going to take in a string input. Again, this was declared way up in the iMapper class. So if we look at iMapper, there's the map from. Remember, the input's a string and the output is a production. And so we can see production is going to return a production, and we're going to return null. So remember I just said that we're not going to work with a production, we're going to work with a list of productions. So let's hop over to the production list mapper, and let's change this from just one production to a list of productions. So what we're saying is we're going to take in a string object and return a list of productions. So now we have that. Let's go back to the production list mapper. Here we go. And we need to change this from a production. We can just delete this if we want. Click here, highlight over it, and say add unimplemented methods. And there we go. Now we'll have return a list of productions. So it will return back. So let's go ahead and say production list mapper. Let's go ahead and resolve those dependencies. Hotkey. So now we have the mapper. Let's go ahead and say mapper.map from. And we have some string input. Let's go ahead and take some string input here. And the string input that I'm going to take is actually going to be the string from the TechPub API. So let's go ahead and run the API again. It's going to load into my text editor. And there it is. I'm going to copy the whole thing. So I'm going to test the entire API as it is right now. I'm going to paste it in. Now, you may have seen, if you're on your screen, you may have seen something a little bit different here. You may have noticed that you have errors all over the place. And mine has been, I've auto escaped all of the quotes. So how did I do that? So the easy way to do that is, if you go up to the top menu and you go to Eclipse's Preferences, you're going to see this window here. And inside of Java, you can go to Java, Editor, Typing, and then down at the bottom you can select this box right here. By default it's unchecked. Check it, which will say escape text when pasting in a string literal. And so what this will do is escape the entire text. So now I should retrieve back a list of production objects itself. Say productions. I'm going to save. And I'm going to go ahead and add all these imports real quick. Now you may have noticed that as I'm typing, things are getting real slow. And if that ever happens to you, the best thing to do really is go ahead and exit Eclipse and restart Eclipse. So I'm going to save it, and I'm just going to restart Eclipse real quick. This happens to be the best way to kind of clear some stuff up, whatever's hung up behind the scenes in Eclipse. You've probably seen the same thing happen before with the different types of operating systems and different IDEs. So just go ahead and restart Eclipse and it should speed things up quite a bit. So here we are back again into our productions. So now we need to provide some type of test to say, alright, did we receive a list of productions back? Now I don't know how many productions are in there, but I know that there's more than 2. So let's go ahead and say assert, control space because I forget the syntax, assert equals, and we're going to expect, let's say 12, say there's 12 productions. And the actual is going to be productions.size. And the size is the size of the list. And so now if I was actually run this, I could just go here and go up to the run command and hit run. And what's going to pop up actually and say, what would you like to do? How would you like to run this test? And you say, I'd like to run a Android JUnit test or what? So I'm going to say Android JUnit test. Click OK, and it's going to run it in the background. It'll take a second, and it's going to actually fire up the IDE. Now, unfortunately, this isn't exactly what I wanted, so I'm going to close out the emulator. What this is doing is actually starting a Android emulator test to actually fire up and test the activities. That's not what I want to do. So let's go back to run. Let's go to run configurations again. And we see Android production list mapper. I'm going to delete that one there. Make sure you want to delete that. Yes, I'll delete it. And then I say I want to create a new one here. Actually, we can close it out and we can just hit run again. I'm going to select the project, hit run, and then I'm going to say Android JUnit test. Okay. And we're still getting this here. Let's go ahead and check to see why this is happening. I'll have to run configurations again. We're going to delete that. Okay, yes. And put our in here. And I actually just went in here and selected inside of this file and did a run. I'm just using the hotkeys for the run, as you would see in the menu. And I'm just going to say JUnit test this time. Just send a run of JUnit test. I'm not testing anything in Android per se. I just want to run an actual regular JUnit test. And now we're going to get a preferred launcher. Now, this is the window I was looking for before. We're going to use specified settings here. And I want to use the Android JUnit test launcher. And so it removes the Android jar from the Bootstrap class path at this point. So we'll click OK. And now we'll actually see the JUnit test went and ran already. And if you look at the JUnit test, you see that it's red. And we see we have a null pointer exception, which makes complete sense. Because if we go inside of the production list mapper, and you can go to F2 to focus, and I'm going to move to production list mapper, we can see that we have a returning null in here. So when I do the size on the list of productions, it's going to fail. So maybe I can try this now. So I can say return new array list of production. So now this will, our test will actually run now, but it's still going to fail. So if we go back to our test now, and I'm just going to run it again, we still see that it ran. And if we move this down to the bottom window, it's a little bit easier to see, so we can open it up wider and condense this down. We can see that the error is JUnit assertion failed error. Expected 12, but it was 0. Okay, so now we need to get the values in there. Everything's working, the code is executing, and just the assertion is failing. So we're failing right here. So how do we use JSON to load this up? Well, what we need to do inside of our TechPub app up here, let's go ahead and we see a libs folder here. What we're going to do is we're going to add the JSON library. So let's go get JSON. And this JSON library is at code.google.com/p/google-json. You can also just Google JSON and it will be the first result. And then what you can do is you can download Google JSON 1.5 release. Let's download the zip file itself. I'm going to open it up, and as soon as it's done downloading, I'm just going to open the file itself, and I see that I have the jar, and I'm just going to copy that jar, and I'm going to actually just go back to my Android project and paste it right into libs. And so now I have a JSON 1.5.jar. I need to add this to my build path, so I need to tell Android that, hey, I want to use this third-party library in my application. So I can just right-click on it, build path, and say add to build path. So now I can use JSON in my application. So let's go back to the production list mapper. So the production list mapper now, inside of here, we can actually use JSON to actually return a list of productions. If we if we had a single result of just a single JSON snippet that just had one production in it, it would be real simple to do. We could say JSON equals new JSON, and you'll see that we have this. So now we have a new JSON object. Let's say JSON dot from JSON, and we can pass in JSON objects, we can pass in reader objects, but we're just actually going to pass in a string. And so I could pass in my input, which is my string, and I could say production.class. Now if I was actually going to say return, and I could actually return a production object. And what this would do is would return a production. Unfortunately, I need to return a list of production objects. And to return a list of production objects, we need to kind of tell JSON, hey, what you're going to be working with as an input, it maps to a particular type. It maps to a list of production. So I need you to parse this, and each time you parse one of these items, throw it into a list for me. And so we need to kind of create a type definition for that. So let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, so I brought over the code and I've typed the code out here to provide a type definition. So I'm saying the type of destination object JSON wants to work with is a type token. Now this is something that's built into JSON as a type token as a parameter, and I looked up the syntax for this on the JSON website, and which is pretty well documented. You can go to the project home and take a look at all of the user guides and roadmaps and design documents. And I went to the user guide to see how to do certain types of things, and you can see primitives, nesting, serializers. You can write your own serializers. You can write your own no object support. Different JSON is very large, and I'm just using just a small piece of it. And so what I'm saying is, now I need a type definition, and JSON, when you have this input, I want your output to be of this type definition, which is just going to be a list of productions. So that's what all it's going to be. So it's just providing a type information. So now if I go back to my test, see production list mapper, and I run this, let's go ahead and run this up. We'll rerun the app. Now we can actually see we got something different, assertion failure back. So we can see the assertion failure expected 12 but was 22. So now it looks like we actually have something back in there. There was 22 in there. Now remember, I wasn't sure how many productions were in there. I just downloaded it just now. I haven't looked at it in a couple of days. Maybe there's a new one that was published. But right now it's 22. So I can just change this to 22 because I can know that it's 22. And if I wanted to, I could go back to JSON result and take the time and count all of these, which I have actually done now, and found out that there are 22 of them. And so what I can also do is come in here and take a look at so I'll set this to 22, save it, and I'll rerun the test. And now we'll see that we have a green test. There we go, now our test passed. So let's go ahead and take this a step further, and let's get an actual production object out of the list of productions. So I'll say production P equals productions dot get. I'm gonna get the location. I just want to get the first one. So it's 0 based. So now I have this. So I'm gonna say assert equals P. This is the expected. Let's go ahead and take a look at the title here of the first one that we see in this list. And we'll say the slug is .NET OSS. Let's just copy this out of here. So I'm assuming the first one, and I'm actually guessing at this point if the first one's going to be .NET OSS. And it's a p.get slug. Those should be the same. So let's go ahead and run it again. And it looks like we passed. So if I just kind of put some stuff at the end here, and we can see we failed because the difference here was .NET OSS, and the difference had the 3 X's here on the right. So it looks like that was correct. So now as I can continue coming down here and start filling out the test, I can know that my mapper has worked correctly. Okay, so I've added the other features here, the slug, the title, the price, the can watch, and the description here. If I go back to JSON format here, so we have the 1, 2, 3 episodes. There's episodes, so that's 3 properties on the production object. Then we have the price, the slug, and the title. And so I have 5 of these up here right now. And the one that I also need is the episode. So let's come back inside of this episode here in this production, see how many episodes we have. So we have the new episode, so that's 1, Subsonics 2, SpecFlows 3, MBC is 4, the Rake and Albacore is 5, SpecFlow Assist is 6. So it looks like we have 6 episodes in this instance. So we can take a look at the production object again. Let's hop into the models here, and we'll see the production object. The production object has a list of episodes here, and the list of episodes also follow that same nomenclature that's inside of the production JSON. The great thing, which is phenomenally cool about JSON, is JSON figured that out, that hey, it looks like you have something called episodes on productions, and it looks like the JSON also has something called episodes. It says, well, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and match them up if I can. And what it did is it went inside and found an array, and it says, well, it looks like you have a list, and a list is an array. So I'm going to see if I can create a new episode for you. And it went inside of here and found that it could create a new episode, and did so. And what it does is it's going to actually load up all the episodes for us. So what we need to do is just check that real quick. Let's make sure that we have 6 episodes. So we're going to get episodes.size. Let's just run this real quick. And it looks like we're still running. So just to prove that, you know, red, green refactor, let's actually keep it at 7 to make sure that it does fail, because there shouldn't be 7, there should be 6. Looks like it failed. Expected 7 but was 6. Great. Let's move this back to 6. Now what we can do is actually get the first episode out and make sure all the values in the episode are right. So I'm going to say is p.getEpisodes.get 0, get the first episode, and I want to make sure that this episode has all the correct values. So I'm going to go ahead and fill all of that out now. Okay, so I filled out all of the assertions here. Now so we can go ahead and run it and see if it works. And it looks like we have an error here. And so this error happens on the expectations was new, but the actual is .NET OSS. And this one is going to be at line 35. And you can go to the line by hitting either Alt-L or Command-L. So I'm going to go to 35. And it looks like that is new for the slug. And this is going to be the episode slug is _new. And so actually what I say is episode slug. Let's rerun this. And so now we got past that. So we have assertion failure expected 480 this, but was 480. So what I actually need to do is turn this into a number for the height. So this one was incorrect. We'll rerun it. And now it looks like assertion failure was null, expected null, but was 0. So it's on line 41. And this one is to get production ID, so it's just going to be blank, it looks like. Actually, excuse me, 0. Because this one is going to be an int that we're working with here. And now it looks like all of our tests are passing. So we now know at this point in time that we have 6 episodes that came through. We have 22 productions, and we have 6 episodes in the first production, and there's 22 productions total. So the great thing about this is we just took this tremendous amount of JSON that looks just like this, and I'm going to expand this out so you can see it in full screen. We took this huge thing of JSON, which is the scroll bar on the right here is pretty small, and we took all of this stuff, all of it, thousands upon thousands of characters, possibly hundreds of thousands of characters, and turned it into hydrated Java objects. And so now what I actually have is a way to map in the mapper package here, using the production list mapper. I can now take the input, which is maybe resulting from an HTTP call, which we cover in the next episode, how to take that output of that JSON and turn it into objects that I can work with inside of my application. The excellent part is I did all of that in 3 lines of code. As long as I followed the convention of keeping the production and the episode classes in sync with the same names in their fields, JSON shoved all those values in there for me. I test drove out an implementation somewhat for testing to make sure that JSON could actually parse those strings inside of the production mapper tests. We can add other tests in here as we kind of go along to start fleshing out different parts of the application if we feel that we need to do so. And right now I can take these objects and start working with them. The only thing that I need to do is connect up into the TechPub API using the HTTP client inside of Android. So in the next episode, what we're going to do is we're going to actually connect up to the HTTP server, the TechPub API, using the default HTTP client. And what we're going to do is we'll download it as a stream, and we're going to consume that stream, turn it into a string, and send it into the production list mapper. We're also going to get rid of the Inside of the source directory, we're going to get rid of the category info and the video info objects. We're just going to completely remove them and replace their implementation with the episode and production objects themselves. What this will allow us to do is then take the values of the production and episodes and load them into the screen. And doing so, when the app first loads, we have to do a few things. We're going to connect up to the TechPub API. We're going to work with an asynchronous call. We're going to show a progress meter. So while the asynchronous communication is happening in the background, while the mapping is happening in the background, we're going to let the user know that, hey, we're loading your data right now. And when that's done, we'll show the list of productions as it's directly pulled from TechPub.